Up until 2 o'clock as we have a big weekend ahead. Miami Hurricanes in the Final Four against UConn. You guys, of course, will get our coverage all day tomorrow on 560 WQAM. And then, of course, the call will be on 104.3 FM The Shark. Pregame starts at 8 o'clock with Danny Rabinowitz. And then Joe Zagacki has your call from Houston. FAU, of course, also in action tomorrow against San Diego State. So South Florida taking over the Final Four. And we have our coverage over there in Radio Row as the Westwood One's coverage of Radio Row is going on, and it's brought to you by Duluth Trading Company. Tell uncomfortable underwear to ride the bench and go buck naked. No pinch, no stink, no sweat. Buck naked performance underwear only from Duluth Trading Company. And Andy Katz joining us from Houston as he has been having a lot of sit-downs with all the Final Four coaches, sat down with Coach L, Dusty May. Andy, thanks for giving us some time, man. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So what were the sit downs like with Dusty May, Coach L? Were they nervous? Are they loose as they get there on this big stage and South Florida is taking over there?
No, it's amazing they haven't. I was with FAU in New York, and obviously I've covered Miami for in various times over the last few years, and FAU. It was remarkable how they handled the moment at Madison Square Garden. That building never disappoints for big moments. The crowds were great, certainly that Thursday night with K-State and Michigan State. But then on Saturday, I don't know if it's a Long Island Boca thing, but it was amazing. The FAU crowd showed, and it was loud. There were 19,000. And those players, as Nick Boyd reminded me, they're pit bulls. They do not wilt, and they come back. They've won in a variety of ways. And Dusty May, he's got some there's just like a chill about him. And I know he's got this sort of Southern Indiana, aw shucks kind of look to himself, but he just keeps it so even. You don't see him get too high, too low. And then with Jim, I mean. His ability to relate, to adapt. We talked about that yesterday. He leans a lot on his son, Jay, who's an NBA assistant, in terms of saying, okay, what works in the NBA? He's very in tune with, I got to get these guys ready for the league or playing professional somewhere. And so they all love to hear that. And his ability to relate to them, decades younger than himself, really has allowed this connection to work. And I was saying this to someone from the ACC yesterday, that at what point, it's probably music to your ears, at what point will we say Miami, one of the best in the ACC, because we're conditioned to think, oh, the ACC's down because Duke, Carolina, and Virginia aren't here. No, right. Miami's here. And when people keep saying, well, there aren't major conferences here, I was like, wait, the ACC's here. Miami's here, so that we got to get over that hurdle somehow and change that narrative.
Andy, is this as we're starting to see more in college college basketball, the importance of having guys in school 3 and 4 years versus the one and dones? The one and dones might be more talented, but we're starting to see more and more of these smaller mid-majors, because they have guys playing on their team for 3 or 4 years, really making a substantial run in the NCAA tournament as of late.
Well, a couple of things here. First off, the last time a team dominated by one and dones won was 2012 with Kentucky. So being older is critical, to win a national championship. We've seen that. The data backs that up. I also think that there's 3 things at work here that have benefited teams from one-bid leagues, lower profile. One, as you mentioned, NIL. If you're not an NBA player, there's a chance to make some money, so you want to stay. You could probably make more money because right now in Europe, post-COVID, there's not a lot of money out there. And so you're more likely to make some more money here to the portal. I'm not playing, Brian Greenlee's a great example at FAU. Didn't play a lot at Minnesota. He's playing great for FAU. So those kinds of things happen. Jason Leday from Ohio State, now at San Diego State. And the third thing that we cannot lose sight of is the COVID year. The COVID year, which will cycle out in 25, 26, if I'm not mistaken, that has allowed these schools, these players to get and stay older. That will obviously go away, but the NIL and the portal won't. Maybe they'll be, tweaked a little, but I do think that's why we're seeing these older teams be so successful, especially from some of these lower profile conferences.
How have you thought, somebody who's covered the sport for a long time, how do you feel like the NIL stuff has benefited? Obviously, it's benefited the Canes greatly, and it's cool to see programs have ways to kind of balance things out. Some coaches have criticized it publicly this year, and a lot of it has alluded to Miami being able to get to where they've gotten. How do you feel like it's benefited them?
Yeah, I'm a fan. Obviously, the other thing I will say this. I don't think we're going to consistently see the recruiting aspect. I know that's the one part that everyone's really fearful of, whether it's in college football or college basketball, because I do think we're going to get to a point where boosters, donors, collectors, you name it, are going to say, wait a minute, I gave X amount and this guy wasn't any good. You didn't play him. I need to see, production before I go all in again. You can't keep coming back to me to try to get player X and then he doesn't perform or then he leaves in a year. Right. That part, I think, will settle down. I do think that this was long overdue in some form or fashion. For example, just use my family. My daughter's in theater, and if she wanted to do, she goes to Northwestern. If she wanted to do like an acting, camp or something back home, she could use her name and say she went to Northwestern and charge it, hypothetically. If you were a tennis player at Miami or a basketball player at Miami, you couldn't go back to your hometown and have a camp with your name and say Miami next to it, which was ridiculous. That was low-hanging fruit that was prevented for these players to do, these student athletes, when they would go back home in the off season, a way to make some money. I mean, everyone knows why you're at school X, so let's not have our head in the sand. And yet that was denied. So that was an easy thing that they should have fixed a long time ago. And finally, it has been fixed. And now there's other, obviously, aspects to make money. I think we're a ways away from unionization and employees and all that. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think the recruiting thing, I get it. I just don't think that's sustainable because I think the people that are giving the money are going to want some return and it's human nature that not everyone's going to pan out. And I think people are going to be really frustrated if they donated and they get nothing back.
Andy, you think this in this situation, the NCAA dropped the ball because they could have had more control of it if they would have just given in a few years ago, rather than have a court system in California do it and everybody have to follow suit to keep up with California?
Yes, but I would say, I just want to be clear on this, and I know I do work for the NCAA as well, that it's not Indianapolis, it's the presidents. The presidents refused for years to acknowledge that the student athlete was more than just a student. That person was also a commodity that produced something for the university. Just in the same manner that a lot of other students do in various skill sets. So the presidents, that's why I think dropped the ball. They did not realize what they had on their campuses because all these presidents, especially in the high profile schools, SEC, you name it, they love going to a championship Final Four. I guarantee you the 4 presidents of these schools will be here in Houston Saturday night, cheering their team on in some box or in a good seat with a donor or booster, because this is good business for their university. So they know what this is about. And so they all collectively drop the ball.
Right. Okay. I can see that. I get it.
Andy, going into this Final Four game against UConn, a 2-part question. What has impressed you about the Hurricanes team on their run to this point? And what are some of the challenges they have going into this one against UConn?
Well, certainly their resiliency. They've done a great job of bouncing back. throughout the course of the season. Offensively, they can score in a variety of ways. It's all going to come down to rebounding, I think, and sort of getting out ahead of UConn. Transition is going to be critical. What's crazy, in talking to Dan Hurley yesterday, he actually said he was surprised that in the second halves of each one of their NCAA tournament games, they weren't tested. They didn't deal with adversity. That always happens in the NCAA tournament, and it hasn't happened to them yet. So if Miami can do that in the second half, how does UConn react? They're the one team here of the four that has not had a late game situation in this tournament. Have they during the season? Yes. But in the last 3 weeks, no. So how will they handle that if Miami can put them in that position in the second half Saturday night?
And then kind of the same thing with FAU for all our Owls fans down here. What has been the thing when you see a Cinderella run like this, a team that's kind of out of nowhere? What has impressed you? I guess what is the thing that sticks out with you with the Owls getting this far, and how likely do you think that they can advance to a championship game on Monday?
I know this is crazy, but I could see them winning the whole thing. I mean, after watching them in New York play two different ways, Tennessee made it a fight, a slugfest, low possession game.
Mm-hmm.
K-State up and down, and they matched them. So I'm going to tell you, being in that building, those first 10 minutes of that K-State game was phenomenal. I mean, it was so entertaining. What a great walk. I mean, Elijah Martin's dunk. I don't know if you guys saw that, but that was crazy. That just absolutely blew the roof off. They're selfless. There is no star. And normally we say, you got to have at least one or two NBA guys to win a championship. That's not the case with them. May not be the case with any of these teams. But we're in obviously, it's been a different year.
With what you just said about them, though, why is UConn such a favorite to win it all?
Well, first of all, the results don't lie. I mean, Iona, St. Mary's, Arkansas, Gonzaga, they took them all apart in the second halves. The difference with UConn is they've got two of everything, so they can put different. They got a deep bench, and no other team has two bigs the way they have Sanogo and Klingon. Mm-hmm. That's been a major difference for them in this tournament.
We appreciate it, Andy. Thanks so much for giving us some time.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, thanks, guys.
There you go, Andy Katz, one of the best in the business when it comes to college hoops.
I'm still trying to figure out. They got two of everything, and he says they got two bigs, but in the same breath, you win the championship based on your point guards and your point guard play.
Mm-hmm.
So he did say something that interests me. I would say the Canes have one of the best rebounders in the country, and he made it about rebounding. But I would say that Miami's point guard play with the four guys, I'll go with, the two starters and the two guys coming off the bench, match up with anybody.
I think it's just a case, like you said, like the Canes got to make it a dogfight. They got to bring UConn to where they haven't been so far yet,
Stress in the second half.
Stress them out.
So what's coming.
That's been the case.
That press is coming. That press is coming.
Thanks again to Andy Katz for joining us. Thanks for Danny Rabinowitz for setting that up out there in Houston. Westwood One's NCAA Final Four Radio Row, brought to us by Monster.com. Monster.com can help you slam dunk the job search and make your next career move. It's time to get off the bench, go to Monster.com, and win the job hunt. Back with more after this.